I lay stretched out on the small couch in my modest apartment in East Atlanta, the faint sound of the city filtering in through the cracked window. A cup of hot tea rested in one hand, while the other pressed against my forehead, trying to soothe the exhaustion that had taken over me. My phone, lying on the coffee table, began buzzing once again, its screen lighting up with messages and calls from my family. The same names flashed endlessly: Mom, Dad, and my brother Jason. I didn't have to look at the screen to know what each message would say. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to answer. 6 months. It had been 6 months since I left that house. No arguments, no tears, no dramatic goodbyes. I had quietly packed a few things, grabbed my old laptop, and walked out the door. The sun had just begun to dip behind the buildings when I left, but no one had stopped me. No one had even asked where I was going. They were used to me being the reliable one, the quiet daughter who always fixed their problems without complaint. I used to think I was strong, that it was my duty to carry the load, to help, to make things right. But now, in this small, quiet apartment, big enough for just me and the silence, I finally understood. For nearly 10 years, I had kept alive a system I never created. I had been the one running, while everyone else just relied on me. The phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't need to look to know it was Mom. I could already hear her words in my head. If you still care about us, call me back right now. I didn't pick up. I just let the phone ring, each vibration a reminder that I had finally broken free from the invisible rope that had bound me for so long. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28 years old. I'm a financial analyst, someone who earned a scholarship to attend a prestigious university, someone who always thought that if I worked hard enough, if I kept my head down, they would eventually recognize me. But the truth was, the harder I worked, the less I mattered. Jason, my older brother, had dropped out of art school after 2 years. He floated from job to job, never really getting anywhere. But to Mom and Dad, he was the dreamer, the one they defended no matter what. Me? I was the one who never caused trouble, never asked for anything. I kept my head down, paid my own way, and still ended up being the one they took for granted. I remember the day I left. Mom was watching her favorite TV show, Dad was buried in his spreadsheets, and Jason was lounging on the couch playing video games. I walked past them, quietly packing my things, and not a single one of them asked where I was going. Not one word of concern. Now, 6 months later, they were trying to reach me. But this time, I wasn't their lifeline anymore. I wasn't the one holding everything together. And for the first time in my life, I felt something that was long overdue: freedom. I started working when I was 16, not for clothes or fun, but because I knew if I didn't take care of myself, no one else would. While my classmates had their parents pick them up after school, I worked at a pastry shop. I rode my bike 4 blocks to get there, wiped tables, mopped floors, and then biked home after dark. No one ever asked if I needed help. No one cared if I was eating or sleeping. But when Jason needed a new laptop because he dropped out of school, Mom had no issue opening a credit card for him. I had always tried to do the right thing, thinking that if I kept helping, one day they would finally appreciate me. But the more I did, the more I became just a walking wallet. When they needed help painting the house, when Jason wanted a new car or to take a vacation, I was the one who always stepped in. And every time I did, it became more expected and less appreciated. It wasn't just the money. It was how they acted like it was my job to take care of everything. It was how Jason always had an excuse for his failures, and how Mom and Dad defended him without question, while I was just expected to keep things running smoothly in the background. But there came a point when I realized that no matter how much I gave, no matter how many sacrifices I made, I was never going to be seen as enough. And when I finally said no, when I stopped being their safety net, I realized something. I was finally allowed to live for myself. I had been carrying their burdens for so long, trying to be the daughter they wanted me to be, but it was never enough. It was never about love. It was about need. And when that need was no longer there, they turned on me. But I had learned my lesson. Kindness isn't infinite, and sacrifice isn't a virtue if it's not appreciated. The first month after I moved into my new place was the most peaceful time I had experienced in years. No frantic phone calls, no one asking me to cover their bills or pick up the pieces of their messes. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could just breathe. I had my own space. The walls, though thin and worn, were mine. The silence was no longer a heavy burden, but a welcome relief. I started taking small steps to rebuild my life. I went to work without the constant pressure of juggling family obligations. I spent my weekends exploring Atlanta, walking through parks, and reading books I had put off for years. I even started cooking meals for myself, something I had never really done before. It was like I had forgotten how to live for myself, how to enjoy the simple things without the constant cloud of worry hanging over me. I no longer had to check my phone every hour, waiting for a message or call asking for help. I no longer felt like I was on a treadmill, running in place, always doing for others, but never receiving anything in return. But the peace didn't last long. About 3 months after I moved out, my phone buzzed with a new message from Mom. It was the same old story. "We need your help. Your dad's having trouble with the mortgage. Can you send us some money?" I stared at the message for a long time before putting my phone down. It wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that I didn't want to help them. It was that I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I had already given everything I could. And what had I gotten in return? Guilt, blame, and a family that saw me only as a resource, never as a person. I tried to ignore the message. I told myself that I had made the right decision, that I wasn't responsible for their choices anymore. But the guilt started creeping in. What if they lose the house? What if they really need me? I put my phone on silent and went about my day. But the next morning, there was another message, and another. Every day, they kept calling. Each message was more desperate, more accusatory. "How could you do this to your family?" they asked. "We're struggling, and you've turned your back on us. How can you live with yourself?" I started getting sick of it, sick of being the one they always turned to, sick of being the one who was always expected to fix their problems. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could provide. And now that I wasn't providing, they were angry. Then came the call from Jason. I could already hear the frustration in his voice even before I answered. "Diana, what the hell is wrong with you? We need your help. Why won't you just do the right thing?" His words were sharp, accusing. "You think you're better than us now, huh? You think you're too good to help your family?" I didn't say anything. I just stared at the phone in my hand, trying to calm the rising anger in my chest. "No," I thought. "I'm not too good. I'm just not doing this anymore." Jason left a voicemail, and for the first time in a long while, I listened to it. His voice was tinged with frustration, but there was something else too. Fear. Fear that the easy solution, me, wasn't going to come through this time. He told me that if I didn't help, they would lose the house. That it would be my fault. He made it sound like I had no choice, like I owed them something. And for a moment, I felt the familiar pull of guilt. But I've already given them everything, I reminded myself. I'm not the one who needs to change. I didn't respond to Jason's voicemail, though. I knew I couldn't go back. Not this time. Not after everything. I sat in my small apartment, replaying the past in my mind. How many times had I covered for Jason's mistakes? How many times had I bailed out my parents when they couldn't make ends meet? How many times had I silently picked up the pieces of their broken lives, only for them to keep pushing me until I was nothing more than a tool for their survival? Enough, I thought. It was enough. I had already given up so much for them, and I was done. No more excuses, no more silent sacrifices. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to shake off the anxiety that had been building up ever since the messages and calls started coming in. It was a strange feeling, not having to look at my phone every 5 minutes, not needing to answer each incoming call. But despite the peace of my new routine, the uncertainty still lingered. I couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if I didn't help them. If the house was really at risk of foreclosure, if my parents and Jason would lose everything. But then I reminded myself, that wasn't my responsibility anymore. They had been relying on me for so long, taking me for granted. They thought I'd always be there to pick up the pieces. But I was done. I had to be done. As the days passed, my phone remained eerily silent. The calls had stopped for a while, and I convinced myself that they had finally accepted my decision. They had to. They had no choice but to find a way to stand on their own. Yet each day felt like a test of how much strength I had left, how much resolve I could maintain before the guilt overwhelmed me. But the silence didn't last long. About 3 months after I moved out, my phone buzzed with a new message from Mom. It was the same old story. We need your help. Your dad's having trouble with the mortgage. Can you send us some money? I stared at the message for a long time before putting my phone down. It wasn't that I didn't care. It wasn't that I didn't want to help them. It was that I knew I couldn't do it anymore. I had already given everything I could. And what had I gotten in return? Guilt, blame, and a family that saw me only as a resource, never as a person. I tried to ignore the message. I told myself that I had made the right decision, that I wasn't responsible for their choices anymore. But the guilt started creeping in. What if they lose the house? What if they really need me? I put my phone on silent and went about my day. But the next morning there was another message and another. Every day they kept calling. Each message was more desperate, more accusatory. How could you do this to your family? They asked. We're struggling and you've turned your back on us. How can you live with yourself? I started getting sick of it. Sick of being the one they always turned to. Sick of being the one who was always expected to fix their problems. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could provide. And now that I wasn't providing, they were angry. Then came the call from Jason. I could already hear the frustration in his voice, even before I answered. Diana, what the hell is wrong with you? We need your help. Why won't you just do the right thing? His words were sharp, accusing. You think you're better than us now, huh? You think you're too good to help your family? I didn't say anything. I just stared at the phone in my hand, trying to calm the rising anger in my chest. No, I thought. I'm not too good. I'm just not doing this anymore. Jason left a voicemail, and for the first time in a long while, I listened to it. His voice was tinged with frustration, but there was something else too. Fear. Fear that the easy solution, me, wasn't going to come through this time. He told me that if I didn't help, they would lose the house, that it would be my fault. He made it sound like I had no choice, like I owed them something. And for a moment, I felt the familiar pull of guilt. But I've already given them everything, I reminded myself. I'm not the one who needs to change. I didn't respond to Jason's voicemail, though. I knew I couldn't go back. Not this time. Not after everything. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of my decision settling in. The guilt, the uncertainty. Was I really doing the right thing? Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I should have tried to help them one last time. But then I remembered everything they had put me through. The years of unpaid debts, the constant asking for more, the way they expected me to be the one who fixed everything. I wasn't their bank. I wasn't their savior. I was just a person, and I had the right to live my life for once. That night, as I was sitting in my apartment, reflecting on the conversation at the coffee shop, the phone rang again. This time, it was Jason. I almost didn't pick up, but something inside me told me I should. Maybe it was because I hadn't heard his voice in so long. Or maybe it was because I still wanted to believe that, somewhere deep down, he cared about me. Diana. Jason's voice crackled through the speaker. You're not answering our calls? You're just going to leave us to deal with this on our own? I took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. His tone was sharp, desperate, but I could hear the guilt-laden undertones, as if he was trying to make me feel like the villain. And I didn't take the bait. I'm sorry, Jason, I said, my voice steady, but I've done enough. You can't keep relying on me. You all need to figure this out on your own. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Jason's breathing get heavier. Finally, he spoke again, his voice cracking. We need you, Diana. You're all we have left. Don't do this. For a moment, I was frozen. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I quickly reminded myself that this wasn't my fault. I wasn't responsible for their problems. I wasn't responsible for saving them. I'm not coming back, I said, the finality in my voice undeniable. I've helped for years. It's time for you to take responsibility. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. With that, I hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of peace. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could finally breathe without the constant pressure of family obligations. But even as I closed the door on that chapter of my life, I knew that the consequences of my decision weren't over yet. My family might never forgive me for this. They might never understand. But I had done what was best for me. And for the first time in my life, I was finally living for myself. The days turned into weeks, and the silence grew louder. I spent the first few months after I cut all ties feeling a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. I had learned to live without the constant weight of my family's expectations, but it was impossible to shake the doubt that sometimes crept into my thoughts. Did I make the right choice? Was I too harsh? Every now and then, a small voice would whisper inside me, telling me I had abandoned them, that I was being selfish for choosing myself over them. But I quickly dismissed it. I had already spent far too many years being the person they could rely on, the one who was always there to clean up their mess. I was their ATM, their safety net. And when I stopped giving, I became the villain. The real test came about 6 months after I left. I had started to settle into my life again. My work was going well, and for the first time, I could focus on myself without worrying about anyone else's problems. I could make plans without thinking about the next time I'd have to cancel because Mom needed help with the bills or Jason needed money for something else. I even started saving a little, something I never thought I would be able to do. But that evening, just as I was finishing a late dinner in my apartment, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew exactly who it was before I even picked up. It was Dad. The moment I saw his name on the screen, my chest tightened. I hadn't spoken to him in months, and I had no intention of starting now, but something compelled me to answer. I didn't know why, but I did. Diana. Dad's voice came through, calm, but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. We need to talk. It's important. I felt my heart race. I had no idea what he could want now. Had they finally hit rock bottom? Were they really about to lose everything? I stayed silent for a moment, just listening to his voice. It was the same voice that used to tell me everything would be fine as long as I was there to fix things. But now there was a strange sense of desperation in his tone. Diana, we're in trouble, he continued. The house is on the brink of foreclosure. We've been struggling for months, and now the bank is giving us one last chance. Please, we need your help. You're the only one who can fix this. My breath caught in my throat. It was the same story, the same line they had fed me for years. I had always been the one who could solve their problems, but this time I wasn't going to fall for it. I wasn't going to be the solution anymore. I've helped enough, Dad, I said, my voice steady, even though my insides were churning. I'm not doing this again. I've given you everything I could. And for what? To be blamed when I stopped? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him sigh deeply, and when he spoke again, his voice was weaker, almost defeated. I know you're angry, but this is the situation we're in. We don't have anyone else to turn to. Please. His plea hung in the air, but I had already made up my mind. I had lived for so long believing that helping them was my responsibility, that I owed them something. But the truth was, they had drained me dry. I had nothing left to give. I can't do it anymore, Dad, I said firmly. I've been the one holding everything together for years, and look where it's gotten me. I've sacrificed my peace, my happiness for you and for Jason, but it's time for you to take responsibility. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, finally, Dad spoke, his voice a little quieter. You're not going to help us at all? The question stung, but I didn't flinch. I had already made my decision. No, Dad, I replied. I'm not going to help you anymore. You need to figure this out on your own. It's time for you to take responsibility, just like I had to when I was on my own. I could feel my hands trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision. I was done. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into being their savior again. This was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. I'm sorry, I said, my voice cold, but I'm not coming back. And with that, I hung up. After that phone call, I didn't feel relief, like I did the first time. I didn't feel joy at finally being free. I just felt emptiness. But it was the emptiness I chose. It was my choice. I could have gone back, could have saved them once more, but I knew if I did, I would lose myself. Every day, as I lived alone, as I moved through my new routine, I knew that I had made the right choice. They might never forgive me, but I had made a choice for myself. For the first time in my life, I was finally living for myself. The months passed slowly, but the silence never felt quite right. There were moments when the quiet was peaceful, when I could finally enjoy my own company without the constant background noise of guilt and obligation. But there were also moments when the weight of the emptiness settled in deep. I knew I had made the right choice, but there were times when I questioned if it had been the only choice. Could I have done more? Could I have been more forgiving, more understanding? The truth was, I didn't know. But what I did know was that I couldn't go back. The past was gone, and no matter how much they tried to guilt trip me, I wasn't their savior anymore. I wasn't the person they could rely on to solve every problem, pick up every broken piece. But just when I thought I had found a new rhythm, when I thought I was moving forward, I got a message. It was from Mom. Her name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I just stared at it. My heart skipped a beat. What now? I didn't want to answer. I knew what was coming. I had stopped answering for months, but for some reason this time I couldn't resist. I slid my finger across the screen and answered the call. Diana, Mom's voice crackled through the phone, a mix of desperation and anger. You need to come back. We're in real trouble now. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my pulse. Not again, I thought. Not this time. I can't help you anymore, I said, my voice firm. I've already given you everything I could. I can't keep fixing everything for you. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mom spoke again, her voice quieter this time, almost pleading. But we've lost so much. She trailed off, her voice cracking. We don't know what to do anymore. You're the only one who can fix this. Please, Diana, please help us. I felt the familiar tug of guilt in my chest, but I quickly pushed it aside. No, I told myself. I've done enough. I can't go back. I'm sorry, I said. I can't be the one to fix everything anymore. I've sacrificed my own happiness for you for years, and I'm done. Her silence spoke volumes. I could hear the tension in the air, the understanding that I wasn't coming back, that I wasn't going to save them this time. You don't understand, Mom finally said, her voice faint. I'm your mother, Diana. I've given you everything. And now you're turning your back on us when we need you the most? Her words stung, but they weren't new. They were the same words I had heard so many times before, but this time they didn't hurt as much. This time I understood that they weren't about me. They were about their inability to accept responsibility for their own lives. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice steady. I understand that you've always relied on me to take care of everything, but I can't do it anymore. I'm not your ATM, and I'm not your fixer. It's time for you to learn to live without me. There was another long pause, and then I heard the click of the phone line disconnecting. I stared at the screen, my heart still racing, but my hands steady. It wasn't relief I felt. It wasn't joy. It was something else entirely. It was a quiet, firm certainty that I had made the right choice. I wasn't going back. No matter how many times they called, no matter how many messages they sent, I couldn't go back. I had given them everything I had, and it had never been enough. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking out the window as the city hummed below me. I thought about the years I had spent taking care of everyone else, about all the sacrifices I had made for people who would never appreciate it. And I thought about how, for the first time, I was free. Free from the guilt, free from the responsibility, free from the constant pressure of always being there for them. But the freedom didn't come without a price. The next morning, just as I was heading to work, I saw a message flash across my phone. This time it was from Jason. I had been expecting it. I had known it was only a matter of time before he tried to pull me back in. You've gone too far, Jason's message read. You can't just walk away from your family like this. You've ruined everything. Don't you care at all? I laughed bitterly. I didn't care. I didn't care about being blamed for their failures anymore. I didn't care about being their scapegoat. I didn't care about any of it. For the first time in years, I felt the sting of anger. Not at them, but at myself for allowing this to go on for so long. They had treated me like a tool, an endless resource, and I had let them. But that was over now. I wasn't their tool anymore. I didn't respond to Jason's message. I didn't need to. I had already made my choice, and that choice was to live my life for me. I was done. The silence stretched on for weeks after that. No more calls, no more messages. The absence of the constant noise from my family felt strange, almost unsettling at first. I had gotten used to the constant buzz of notifications, the feeling of being tethered to them. But now, there was nothing. Just peace. And yet, with that peace came an unexpected weight. The quiet was heavier than I had anticipated. Every now and then, I would find myself reaching for my phone, expecting to see a message or a missed call from one of them. But there was nothing. No more demands, no more apologies, just emptiness. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Part of me felt free, but another part, a much smaller part, felt lost. It wasn't long before the guilt crept back in. Not the kind that had plagued me before, the kind that made me feel like I was responsible for everything. No, this was different. This was the kind of guilt that came from knowing how much I had walked away from, how much I had left behind. The problem was, I didn't know how to go back. I couldn't. I had already seen what happened when I gave too much. They had never seen me as a person. They had only ever seen me as someone to fix things, someone to take care of them when they couldn't take care of themselves. As time passed, I threw myself into my work, spending long hours at the office and diving into new projects. I kept myself busy so I wouldn't have to think about them, about how they were doing without me. I tried to convince myself that they were just fine, that they had made their choices, just like I had made mine. But the truth was, I couldn't stop wondering if they were okay. Then one day, just as I was wrapping up a long day at work, my phone lit up again. The screen flashed with a familiar name, Mom. I stared at the screen for a moment, wondering if I should answer. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what she had to say. But I couldn't bring myself to ignore her call, not after all this time. Diana, Mom's voice sounded more tired than usual. We need to talk. I didn't say anything, just waited for her to continue. It's about the house, she said, her voice weak. We've had a few setbacks, and things are getting worse. We don't know where to turn anymore. We're asking for your help, again. Please, Diana, we need you. I felt my chest tighten, the same words, the same story. I can't do this again, I thought. But something in her voice, the desperation, made my stomach churn. For a split second, I considered it. I thought about how much I had already given, how much they had relied on me. How could I turn my back on them now? But then I remembered. I remembered everything. The years of sacrifice, of giving without ever receiving. The silent resentment that had built up over time. The way they had treated me like a resource. I couldn't go back to that. Not again. I can't, Mom, I said, my voice firm. I've done everything I can. You can't keep asking me to fix everything. It's time for you to take responsibility. I'm not going to be the one who saves you this time. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, slow and shaky. Please, Diana, she whispered. We can't lose everything. We need you. You're all we have left. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words pressing on me. I had been here before, had heard these words countless times, but this time they didn't affect me the way they used to. This time I wasn't going to be manipulated. I wasn't going to be guilted into giving more than I could afford. I'm sorry, I said softly, but I can't help you anymore. I'm not the answer. I've done more than enough. I heard her start to say something, but I didn't let her finish. I hung up before the words could sink in. For a long time after that call, I sat in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt empty. But this time, the emptiness didn't feel like loss. It felt like liberation. Like I was finally free of the weight I had carried for so long. But the emptiness also brought with it something I hadn't expected. Loneliness. It wasn't the loneliness of being alone. It was the loneliness that came from knowing that I had cut myself off from everything I had ever known. My family, my home, the life I had built around being there for everyone else. For the first time, I didn't know who I was without all of that. I spent the next few days lost in my thoughts, trying to figure out what was next. My apartment, which had once felt like a safe haven, now felt too quiet, too empty. I had gotten used to being needed, to being the one people could rely on. But now that I wasn't that person anymore, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. That's when the message came. From Jason. It was short, simple. You've made a huge mistake. I stared at the screen for a long time, not sure what to do. I had expected something like this. He was angry, he was scared, and he was blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. I didn't respond. The weeks that followed felt like a strange limbo, suspended between the relief of my decision and the undeniable ache of loss. I had cut ties, but the aftermath was anything but clean. The silence had settled in, but there was an emptiness that lingered, a space that I couldn't quite fill. It was the kind of emptiness that made you question if you had done the right thing, not just about walking away from my family, but about everything I had given up in the process. At work, I kept my head down, buried in spreadsheets and presentations, trying to focus on the one thing I knew I could control. I kept busy, filled every moment with tasks, and ignored the growing sense that I was losing myself in the process. I had been living for others for so long, taking care of their needs, their debts, their mistakes. I was tired of it. But now that I was no longer needed, I didn't know what to do with my time. The messages from Jason didn't stop. They came every few days, each one more desperate than the last. Please talk to Mom. You've ruined everything. I don't understand why you're doing this. But I ignored them. I couldn't let him manipulate me into feeling guilty anymore. I knew he wasn't angry because of what I had done. He was angry because he didn't know how to survive without me. And then one night, I came home to an unexpected surprise. A letter, sitting on the kitchen counter. It was from my parents' lawyer. I stood frozen for a moment, my hand still on the door handle, staring at the envelope like it was something foreign. I had no idea what it was, but the fact that it was a legal document made my stomach churn. Slowly, I picked it up and opened it, the words printed neatly on the page. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. I felt a strange coldness wash over me as I read the letter. It was real. The house was really going to be lost. My parents hadn't been able to save it without my help. And even though I had made the decision to stop bailing them out, the letter felt like a punch to the gut. I had always been the one who held everything together, and now everything was falling apart. I sank down onto the couch, staring at the letter in my hands. I had spent so many years thinking that if I just kept helping, everything would eventually be okay. That one day, they would realize how much I had done for them, and that I would finally get the appreciation I deserved. But now, they were on the verge of losing everything, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The guilt that had been dormant for so long started to creep in again. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for them, the money, the hours, the emotional toll, all the times I had put my life on hold to take care of their problems, and now I was being forced to face the consequences of my decision to walk away. But something else was creeping in too. Anger. Not just at them, but at myself for letting it go on for so long. I had spent my whole life trying to fix things for people who never took responsibility for their own actions. I had sacrificed my happiness, my dreams, all for the sake of a family that would never be satisfied with what I gave. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to center myself. This wasn't my fault. It couldn't be. I had done everything I could. They had made their choices, and now they had to face the consequences. I couldn't keep being their solution. Not anymore. But even as I told myself that, a small part of me felt the pull, the need to go back, to fix things, to save them. It would be so easy, wouldn't it? Just one more time. Just one more sacrifice. But that would only mean going back to the same pattern. I wasn't going to do that. I couldn't. I set the letter down on the coffee table and stared at it for a long time, my heart heavy. It was their mess now, and it had to stay that way. I had given them everything, and now I had to let go. The next day, I didn't respond to any of the messages from my family. I didn't call them. I didn't acknowledge their pleas for help. Instead, I took a walk through the city, the cool breeze brushing against my face. I breathed in the fresh air, feeling it fill my lungs and clear the fog in my mind. I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep carrying their burdens. And as much as it hurt, I had to stay strong. I was learning to live for myself, and that was worth everything. The days that followed were a strange kind of calm, a peace that felt unfamiliar and unsettling. I was still adjusting to life without the constant pressure of my family's needs. The silence, once deafening, had become the backdrop of my existence. And yet, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their absence. I had freed myself, but in doing so, I had severed ties with a life I had known for so long. The calls from my family had tapered off after the last confrontation. The finality in my voice had clearly resonated with them, and though it stung to admit it, I felt a strange satisfaction in knowing that I had stuck to my decision. They had always taken me for granted, assuming I would always be there, but now I had taken control of my own life. I started to find new routines. I took up yoga in the mornings, something I had always wanted to do but had never had time for. I began to explore the city, visiting parks and galleries, doing things for myself instead of always putting others first. And most importantly, I started to save. Not for someone else's bills, not for their emergency expenses, but for my future. A future that didn't revolve around sacrifice and invisible debts. But then, out of nowhere, another message came. It wasn't from Mom or Jason this time. It was from Dad. Diana, the message began, the words simple, but there was something in the tone that caught my attention. We need to talk. Please, if you can, just hear us out. The house is gone. We've lost everything. I just need to talk to you, just for a minute. My heart sank. It wasn't just the fact that they had lost the house. It was the finality of it. They hadn't just lost material things. They had lost the foundation they had built their entire lives on. And as much as I had wanted to stay strong, to remind myself that this was their mess, a part of me couldn't help but feel the sting of their failure. I sat there, staring at the message, trying to figure out what to do. Should I ignore it? Should I call them and listen to their guilt trip one more time? Or should I go back, just for a moment, and give them what they were asking for, a chance to explain? But I knew. Deep down, I knew. If I opened that door, I would be walking right back into the same cycle. They would expect me to fix everything, to smooth over their mistakes, to be the solution. And I couldn't be that person anymore. I couldn't go back to being the fixer, the one who made everything right. So I did what I had been doing for months now. I ignored the message, I didn't respond, I didn't reach out. Days passed, and eventually the calls stopped. It wasn't easy, and the temptation to return to the old patterns still loomed large. But I knew that if I allowed myself to go back, I would lose everything I had worked for, everything I had rebuilt in myself. One evening, a few weeks after that last message, I was sitting on my balcony, sipping a cup of tea and watching the sunset. The city was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It was the kind of peace that only comes after you've fought for your own freedom, after you've said no to the things that have held you back for so long. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to please my family, trying to be the perfect daughter, the one who could fix everything. I thought about the years I had spent trapped in a cycle of giving, never getting anything in return. And I thought about how, for the first time in my life, I was free. Free to be myself, free to live my life the way I wanted to. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the city, I realized that I didn't need them to approve of my decisions. I didn't need their validation. What I needed was to live for myself, to stop sacrificing my happiness for the sake of others. The phone didn't ring that night, and the silence that had once felt suffocating now felt like a comfortable companion. I was finally learning how to live in it. The next morning, I woke up early, as I had grown accustomed to. I stretched, feeling the warmth of the sunlight on my skin as I opened the window. I let the fresh air fill the room and breathed deeply, appreciating the simple joy of being alive, of being free. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was no longer a prisoner to my family's demands or their expectations. I was no longer the one who carried the weight of their failures. I was just me, Diana, living my life the way I always should have. And that was enough.